Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Dorothy Lee's book, Freedom and Culture. So this is, at this point, some fairly old cultural anthropology. The original copyright for this is 1959, so this is a bit dated. You don't necessarily, if you're a cultural anthropologist, a sociologist, something like this, this is good foundation stuff. It's not current, though. You want to be aware of that. But the key question, really, that Lee is interested in this book is, what does freedom mean in different cultures? How is freedom set up, or conceptualized, or actualized? And she looks at a number of different cultures. She looks at different elements of this question throughout. We've got chapter titles like Individual Autonomy and Social Structure, The Joy of Work as Participation, Equality of Opportunity as a Cultural Value, Our Basic Needs Ultimate, Symbolization and Value, Linguistic Reflection of Wintu Thought, View of the Self in Greek Culture, etc., etc. So she's looking at a lot of different dimensions of this. She's looking at linguistics. She's looking at social organization. She's looking at hierarchy. She's looking at religion. She's looking at taboos and social customs. She's looking at ways of relating to other people within a society, etc., etc. And one of the big touchstones that she often uses, one technique that she uses in a lot of these essays, is to compare contemporary, for her, 1950s, U.S. culture against the other cultures that she's looking at, which are often Native American cultures, some cultures from Southern Africa, some cultures from Australia or New Zealand, Polynesia. So she's looking at these kinds of different cultures. And one of the conclusions that she implicitly comes to, or one theme that we see throughout these essays, is that in a society like the U.S., and this was, I think, true in the 50s, and it's still true today, we have these values like freedom, like equality, in part because we don't have strongly defined social structures or socio-cultural practices that allow us to function without sort of explicit external instruction or guidance, right? So, in one essay, in, I think, Personal Significance and Group Structure, if I'm remembering correctly. Yes. So in Personal Significance and Group Structure, the first few pages of this essay is actually dedicated to talking about her experience putting her children in school in the U.S. and the ways in which the school structure kind of crushed their individuality, kind of privileged the group result, and so eliminated their ability to be unique, individual, creative, to make their own decisions and things like this. And this has definitely changed to some extent in the U.S. education system, but it is still something that we practice today. Standardized testing is an incredibly important part of the U.S. education system. Whether or not that's a good thing is a different question. Because one of the things that she talks about is how in the US we have a system that privileges equality. And there's a number of different ways to define equality. One of the ways, but in all of the ways that we in the US or in the West more generally tend to define equality, what she says here is, the varying conceptions of equality have this in common. All are based on comparison and measurement of some kind. All begin not with the individual case, not with the person in his dignity, but with an overall principle, a standard externally set and applied, a standard chosen because it can be commonly applied without deviation, because it is fair and symmetrically just. This is, again, the idea behind something like the SATs or the ACTs, the college entrance exams that are most commonly used here in the US. These are standardized tests. Everybody in the country who takes them takes the same tests. The problem with this is that it establishes a particular external metric for assessing everybody. Everybody has to meet the same standard. Whether or not that is a productive approach to individual success, to individual abilities, to allowing people to be successful in and of themselves is a different question. But it is an externally standardized metric, and everyone has to meet it. Whereas in a lot of other cultures that she talks about, this is not the case. There's not a question of comparative assessment, whether that's comparing one person's achievement against another person's achievement, or whether that's comparing them against an externally set standard. Instead, there are these notions of how to live a good life, how to be a proper human being in the world. And these are generally not enforced through commands or external authority because, as she says, one of the things that's consistent across many other cultures is a respect for autonomy. So she says here, for instance, such respect for autonomy may appear extreme to us, yet it would be taken for granted in a number of the Indian tribes in this continent. For example, an anthropology student who was observing relations between parents and children was puzzled to see a baby with hair so long that it got in its eyes and seemed to cause him discomfort, though otherwise his mother treated him with care and affection. When she finally asked why the baby's hair had been left so long, the mother answered, "He has not asked to have it cut." The baby was about 18 months old and could barely talk, yet the mother would not take it upon herself to act for him without his request or consent. These instances exemplify a belief so deep that it apparently permeates behavior and decisions and operates without question or reflection or conscious plan. It is a belief so internalized as to be regarded as almost an organic ingredient of the personality. The individual shown absolute respect from birth and valued as sheer being for his own uniqueness apparently learns with every experience to have the same respect and value for others. He is trained to be constantly sensitive to the beginnings of others. So, what this leads to is societies in which people don't order one another to do things, they don't tell or instruct one another to do things. What they do is help others learn to navigate a world of taboos, a world of proper behavior. They express desires or they express preferences without sort of linguistically even having the structures in some cases to say, do this, don't do that. sometimes, again, not even, sometimes the language that a society has developed does not have an imperative component. It doesn't have a linguistic marker for giving orders. So what you have instead is a social system or a socio-cultural system in which everyone is dependent on everyone else, and in some cases, the entire sort of cosmological scheme of the universe, of existence itself, is dependent on people playing their role. Every being in existence must play its particular role within society in order to have harmony and for that society to survive. So, in talking about the Navajo, one of the things Lee says is, we find a tightly knit group depending on mutual responsibility among all its members, precisely structured universe, and a great respect for individual autonomy and integrity. And a little bit later she says, most of all, an individual has to learn to walk safely through life, maintaining his harmony with the universe. This involves learning to observe a large number of taboos and procedures which are aspects of every act. To learn, for example, what is to be done with the left hand, which direction to have his hogan face, that's tent, a dwelling of some kind, I'm not 100% sure. What is to be started in a sunwise direction or to be taken from the east side of a tree, what to avoid touching or saying or looking at. All this could be seen as inhibiting or negative or as interfering with the individual, but to the Navajo it is guidance in the acquisition of an essential skill, the freedom to act and to be. So what she sees consistently across a wide range of cultures is that having these very detailed and defined sociocultural structures actually allows individuals a tremendous degree of freedom. That is, they can behave the way that they want to behave, secure in the knowledge and the understanding that their behavior and the choices that they make, they are responsible to others. They are responsible to the universe in some cases. And so, I think a good way to think about it is like poetry, right? There's free verse poetry where you write and there's no preset structure, right? Your lines can be any length, no rhyme scheme, you can break it up into stanzas or not, whatever you want to do. But then there's also formal poetry, things like sonnets, pantoums, things like this, where there is a defined structure for how the language should move. And a lot of poets actually find a tremendous amount of freedom within that structure. You follow those set rules, and that allows your creativity to flow in a way that sometimes free verse doesn't. So that's kind of the thing that Lee consistently returns to throughout the essays in this collection, is this idea that having a strict and internalized set of regulations for sociocultural behavior actually encourages individual creativity within the framework of those rules and guidelines.